I discovered smoke painting late one night. I had been working on making prints, and I had done some prints of red fire ants. And I looked at it, and I just hated it. And I wanted it to be gone. And so I took it over to the sink, and I set it on fire. But rather than fall in the sink, it fell on the counter. And so then I blew it out, and that was a big mistake because it flared up. So I didn't know what to do. I grabbed a spatula and I whacked it several times, and I put it out. And in the process, it had flipped over. And I looked at the back, and the back looked like a Zen painting. And I said, wow, this is beautiful. And so for the next several months, I just kept playing with fire and paper. I've tried every source of fire. Matches work, but they go out really fast. I've tried barbecue matches, the long ones, but they actually don't stay lit upright. It's funny. I used to smoke. I quit several years ago, but I wish I had my Zippo lighter because that would have given me a nice flame. The important thing about the smoke is that it has to be a little bit dirty. If the fire burns too clean, nothing will accumulate on the paper. Smoke painting doesn't take many supplies. You need a thick piece of paper that you can hold over your head without folding down, and then a source of smoke. For example, a candle. Candles work quite well, or you can use a cigarette lighter. I oftentimes use a Bic cigarette lighter. Or my favorite source of smoke is a kerosene lantern, a small kerosene lantern. They all work well, and it depends on the size of the painting you're making. If you're working large, you want a large source of smoke. Though I do want to always emphasize that you are playing with fire. So first of all, this medium is not appropriate for children, and nor is it appropriate for adults who don't take care of not setting your house on fire. The first thing I do is I put a metal tray down that I work on top of it. I use a baker's tray so that if for some reason I drop it, it doesn't set the table on fire. So then you hold the paper over your head, and you're just very careful. You have to keep the smoke moving constantly, because if you keep it in one place, you'll set the paper on fire or you'll scorch it. So you have to be careful about that. That's something you learn very quickly. I also on the side have a little metal tray filled with about a ½ inch of water, so that if I actually set the paper on fire, I can just put it in the tray. I used to keep a fire extinguisher by my side, but now I don't do it anymore. But it might be a good idea if you're starting. So you put the paper over your head, then you put smoke on it, and then you take it down, and then there are a variety of ways to shape the smoke. You can use cotton swabs to shape the edges. You can use cotton balls to lighten it. I like to use watercolor brushes, the softer the better, to shape the edges of things, to lighten things, to give it texture. A kneaded eraser can take off a lot of smoke. Gum eraser can take off even more. And then a lot of times I'll use sandpaper to really create texture and a lot of excitement. When you're painting with smoke, you can paint anything. You can paint landscapes. That's my favorite subject. But you can paint still lifes. You can even paint portraits. I've done self-portraits with smoke. I've done portraits of friends. And anything you can do with paint, you can do with smoke. You can work in any tradition. You can work with hard edges, soft edges. You can work abstractly. But for me personally, I'm working within what's called the American tonalist tradition. That was a very short-lived artistic movement from about 1890 to 1910. Whistler was the most prominent American tonalist. And Whistler said that he applies paint like breath on glass. No visible brushworks, very, very ethereal. And the American tonalists did not try to depict a certain place like Yosemite. Instead, they tried to evoke a spiritual mood, a mood of transcendence and transience. American tonalists tend to draw twilight or sunrise scenes where there's large differences, stark differences between dark and light, though the differences are smooth. And so it looks like you're waking up and seeing the world as it's waking up, or you're going to sleep, after a long day and you're looking forward to just dozing off. I love to use the process to meditate on life because it's a slow process. You can't paint with smoke quickly. So you have to use the smoke to glaze the paper and build up layers by going over a certain passage 10, 15, 20, sometimes 30 or 40 times. And while you're painting, then it's a good time to meditate on the deeper questions of life. And for me, the one that, since I'm now 76, almost 77, the question is, what now? I just don't have that much time left. And so I meditate on the life I've lived and what lies before me and the friends I have now and what's happening in their lives. And for me, I like to think of the Japanese concept mono no aware, which is translated as a gentle sense of sadness in the passing of all things. So the main theme of all my paintings now is transience. And, transience. And maybe that's the theme of life itself. The most important thing about painting a strong image is tonal value, about lights, darks, and midtones, about arranging the tones into shapes that create a strong image. Japanese actually believe that you can express all colors in black and white, and I believe that as well. The other thing about smoke painting is that you have to pay attention to the quality of your edges, the variety, the quality, and the placement of your edges. They say that if you want to assess the skill of a painter, take a look at the edges. A skilled painter will always have a variety of hard edges, soft edges, lost and found edges, and they won't be randomly distributed. They will be placed to direct your eye and to keep your eye moving. So one really important benefit of smoke painting is it teaches you to become a better artist. That's one thing. And I think it also teaches you, or it can teach you to be a better person, because you can do it in a harsh, agitated way. And I do that sometimes. But you can also do it in a gentle way. And whatever you do, it's like the Zen Buddhist monks who paint the enso, the Zen circle. The smoke, because it's such a direct personal process, will reflect what's happening inside of you at that moment. So it's a constant way of checking in with yourself and trying to express yourself deeply. Presentation of my smoke paintings is really important. In fact, when I begin a smoke painting, I think of it framed on a wall. The reason I do that is because until I get it in a frame and put it on a wall to look at it, I'm too close to it. When I put it there, then I look at it as if it's something separate from me. And most people work in art understand exactly what I'm saying. And it's something that's no longer a part of me, but something that belongs to the world. When I start a smoke painting, the first thing I do is I mask off the area that I'm going to paint. And I use 3M blue painter's tape, and it's important to use the blue painter's tape with the orange core, because that's low adhesive tape, and you can pull it off without damaging the paper. Then I paint, and then when I'm done with the painting and I like it, I pull off the tape, and then suddenly it's graphically very strong because it has clean edges and clean corners. And it always reminds me when I'm painting to make sure that all four corners are different. My feeling is that the beauty of the smoke paintings is that you literally have thousands of particles of smoke that are sparkling. And so I want to keep that sparkle. So I don't fix it. I don't spray it with anything. But that requires that I use a hidden mat that's behind the top mat. And so I put a hidden mat to keep the top mat from touching the smoke. Because if you touch the smoke, you will lift it. Then I use a double mat, a shadow mat, to put on top because I like the shadow. It amplifies the smoke. It's a very subtle way. And also, when you put it on, because you have a hidden mat behind the top mat, there's a tiny space between the mat and the painting. And that tiny space casts another shadow that, unless you're looking for it, you will never notice it. But what that tiny cast shadow does is it creates a soft transition from the white of the mat to the smoke painting. And then I now use fine line chromatic frames. They're a very thin metal black frame. I ordinarily do not use metal frames when I'm framing a painting because the uniformity of the metal can deaden the image. But because the frame is so fine, it creates a really neat edge. And I put it up and put the glass over it, and it's done. And the wonderful thing about these frames is that I've found that on Amazon, I can get 4 frames for $39.75. That's less than $10 per frame, where you have a gallery quality frame with an archival mat that will last forever. I discovered this process by accident, and I've been painting and developing my understanding of the process for 15 years, and I've learned a lot. I don't think I have another 15 years ahead of me, and so I want to share it with people so that they can get what I've gotten out of it, and I hope that they can share it with other people and pass it on. Now, I'm sure I'm not the only person in the world that paints with smoke, but I've not met another person who does. And so maybe whoever does it, they can share their process and we can get it out there for everyone to do except children. Except children, you know.